storm front come through, and we'll see what happens. So the next one comes through, and it's about like the first one. It's a hard, cold winter storm. So now we're, you know, I don't know, 10th, 12th of October, something like that. We're well past the normal time that Hourglass would be picked. And so we get a little break. Bob and I go and taste the fruit again, and there's virtually no physiological change at this point. And now,
sugar was the same.
Sugar was the same. Acid,
flavor was the same.
Flavors. The seeds were still, a lot of the seeds were still in transition. They hadn't fully lignified yet.
Still kind of green.
Yeah, still a little green. And so now I'm looking at the radar, and I'm seeing a series of storms. The storm door has now opened up on the Pacific, and these storms are bearing down on us. And I can see a series of probably 3 or 4 storm fronts. Now, we've already been through 2 full-on winter storms at this point. So I said, Bob, what should we do? Should we cut our losses at this point? Because there really doesn't look to be any more heat event that is going to trigger these plants to get over the hump. And Bob said, well, you know, Jeff, you have to understand plant physiology. I understand why you think that heat, I mean, obviously heat is a trigger for ripening, and it's the normal trigger that we go to. But there are other triggers, and so, you know, time is a trigger, cold is a trigger, cold rain can be a trigger. He said the best thing that happened to you right now is if we get a frost, like a hard cold, you know, mid to low 30s. He said that would hormonally shock the plants and change their physiology so that they would finish the ripening process. He said, short of that, a series of good hard cold, these rainstorms that have come through have actually been good, and another few of those will push it over the top. I said, Bob, you know, I've lived in Napa Valley all my life. Most of my friends are farmers or winemakers. I've never heard anybody speak like that. This is a very unusual kind of discussion that we're having. And he said, well, this is an unusual year. We don't get years like this very often. And being up on the mountain of Pride, where we have very different growing conditions, he said, I've learned a lot up there. And the valley doesn't usually get those kinds of conditions, but that we got a very unusual year. And you're not going to size up your berries by rain. The rains are cold, so we don't have to worry about mold. If these were tropical storms, we'd have some other issues to deal with. Cabernet is a thick-skinned, loose cluster of the grape, so we're not going to have to worry about bunch rot. If the conditions change and we start getting tropical storms, then we'll deal with that as they come up. But these are winter storms, and these are good storms. These are the storms that can finish that ripening process. And I'm like, wow, I've never considered this, and we've never lived through this before. This is a whole new game for me. So I was quite nervous about the scenario, but you know, when you have somebody like Bob Foley who is giving you recommendations, you tend to listen to them, or at least if you're smart, you do. So I said, okay, Bob, well, let's go with it. And it was a very uncomfortable thing to live through. Having not gone through that before, I didn't really know exactly what we were getting into. So once we made the decision to go ahead and get through a series of, and it really 3 or 4, we had a fast that probably through or more,
2 weeks,
over a month, through a month period of rain, with a few intermittent days where it would kind of air out, but we weren't getting any heat. The heat event is going clear the year. So it rains, it rains, it rains, it rains, it rains. We get to the middle part of November.
You're making a TBA at that time, right?
At this point, I think, I tell Bob, you know what, here, what we should do is just push it into January and forget the 05 harvest and 06A and 06B. I mean, geez, what are we doing out here? Bob said, don't panic, it's going to be okay. And you have to know this about Bob. He is completely unflappable. He is, it's virtually impossible to get him anxious about anything. He's just a very mellow, even keel, and he's drawing from a wealth of knowledge and experience that very, very few people in Napa Valley have. And so he's not agitated about it. Now, every time I'd go to the grocery store and I'd see, you know, this winemaker and that farmer and so forth and so on, and they'd all ask me how my harvest would turn out, and I would say, well, it hasn't yet. We have not harvested yet. They would look at me like we're completely
how's the
out of our
wine coming
minds.
in the barrel? Well, it's not in the barrel yet.
Exactly. It's not even fermented, in fact. It's not even in the barrel. It's still hanging out there. And they'd look at us like we were crazy. I mean, I ran into Francois Bouchon at one point in the Sunshine Market, and she asked me the same question, and I said, it hasn't come in yet. She said, Jeff, look out in the parking lot, it's sheet running, what the heck's going on? So, and so it was a very, now we're changing about November 5th, actually, the storm. Get to a couple of days, 15th, all right, I go set vineyard, break for a bang. And physiological taste plants have changed, and seeds are more liquid. These might change the flavor. Now the seed, the green carrot, and we've worked through spark green carrot, green sugars are the sugars maintained about flat. This is one of the lower. This is one of the lowest sugar years that we picked. It was probably I think it was 25 degrees Brix.
Really?
Yeah, 24 and a half, 25 degrees Brix.
What's the alcohol in the one?
I think it's in the low 14s.
Okay.
And so, and we had higher acids, and our pHs were a little bit lower than would be traditional. But we were able to maintain and attain that dark fruit character.
Yeah.
And that was very exciting. It was a very exciting breakthrough for us to understand how to farm in cooler vintages. And I think that as we continue to evolve and develop our thought processes in Napa Valley, I mean, we're still a very, very young industry as it comes down to understanding what we're doing about farming to make Napa Valley style wines. So there's this whole evolutionary process, and I think 2005 was a great vintage for us to truly understand the mechanisms of what we do in a cooler vintage. And we really don't have issues getting fruit ripe in this valley. Our issues are maintaining and dealing with heat and working around heat really low, which is to keep the lower, the generosity lower, the pH, and be able to get to that physiological ripeness, which happens after that ripeness, to be able to get at that point without sugarless of sugars. And get to that, starting to access the conclusion. And this is, again, I'm come to, and none of really know that it'll be another generation or two before we kind of have this generate figured out. Really, I'm starting to come to the conclusion that the better vintages will be, but I'm more exception to the vintages as we look at how to farm in cooler environments. When we get presented to those, well, and you know, 1998 is a classic example. A lot of those 1998 wines right now are spectacular. They're really starting to show well.
We've had a few of them. When Dave and I would go to the wine tasting events, family
winemakers,
family winemakers, and God, we went to one in San Diego, and you could say, okay, this is a 98. I mean, because it was just so green, so herbaceous, that I mean, it was distinctive because of that.
Yep.
But then we've also had a few. Well, at your birthday party, you brought out the 98, and it of what, the Screaming Eagle.
Yeah.
Screaming Eagle, and that competed with what,
97 and 97 and 99,
and was great.
Yeah, I've had the 98 Screaming Eagle several times, and it's really quite lovely.
And the 98 Schaefer Hillside Select.
I might like it better than the 97.
Well, and in fact, when we had those three vintages, there were several people
that preferred
the 98.
Probably has, at this point now, probably has